Hello, everyone. My name is Jurgen Appelo. I am the CEO of Happy Melly, and I'm here to talk with Christoph and Steve and Patrick, and maybe some other people who will show up soon, about a question that is on my mind for a while, which is how do we measure improvement? I have that question because I get that question asked all over the world. People ask me all the time, how do we measure performance of teams? How do we measure progress and improvement in our organization? And I thought about it, and it's a difficult question to answer. So that is why it is on my mind. I want a good answer to that question. And, it is the third one that came up in the Happy Melly Coffee series of talks that I'm having with my friends of the Happy Melly Network. So first I'm going to ask them, does the question make any sense? How do we measure improvement? Maybe Christoph or Steve or Patrick. One of you has some comments about that question. So anyone, shoot.
So I think the question makes sense, Jurgen, but the question is very broad. So it's how do we measure improvement? But there's so many things which you can measure improvement on.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want very specific answers, that you'll get a lot of different answers depending on the situation, depending on you're measuring improvement of a team, are you measuring improvement of the engagement of people to a company, or what are you actually measuring on? And then of course the question is who's measuring what? Who's measuring who?
So
it's a very broad question, so it's difficult to give one simple straightforward answer.
Right. Steve?
So I think as soon as you add any kind of metrics to improvement, then you can see what it is at the beginning and then what it is over time. So I guess if you take it very abstractly, you can say, well, actually there's been this much of activity, and if you compare it over, say, a 6-month period, if you're able to increase it, then that's a very clear way of having a metric. But that's a very KPI driven. It doesn't really show any kind of behavior or how you've got to that point. Mm-hmm. So I guess you can see it by numbers, but you also need to be more qualitative and understand the day-to-day running.
Okay. Christoph, what's your opinion about the question?
I guess my problem is maybe, or what I sometimes tell people when we talk about measuring, I say, why don't we use the word observing, and we get much further, because measuring always implies objectivity by numbers, and I think you will not get this. It's just too complex a system, and you will not get objective numbers. You just can do what you want, and aside from the fact that, as we know, in a complex system, if you observe it and measure it and do all these measurements, you will influence it also, of course. And the question is, will you try to reach the numbers instead of really the improvement? Is that also a dangerous result? So I sometimes wonder if how can we observe improvement might be the better question, and then we get away from just finding KPI type things, but other ways of finding out whether people improve or not. Instead of just looking at numbers. That would be my idea.
My question around the question would be, why are people asking this question? Because sometimes there is this implied rewards thing going on, where observing something is not enough. If for those people, they want something that is measurable because there is a target and bonus or some other kind of reward involved. That could be the reason why they're asking the question. I agree that maybe rephrasing it to how can we observe improvement would be the better question, because that sort of separates the observation of the improvement from what are we going to do, and does anyone need to be rewarded for that at all? That's an entirely different conversation. So yeah, that's a good one, I suppose. So
the question is, who wants to know?
Yeah.
Do I want to know if I'm improving, or does my boss want to know if I'm improving? Or, that's also another question. Who asks the question is I guess. think I myself ask this question. I want to know if I'm improving, and then I think maybe my own judgment and my peers' judgment might be the best way. I don't know. But if my boss wants to know, then he might not be happy with having my own judgment on it, or he's not going to be able to judge it because he doesn't see me often enough. So that's why he wants numbers rather than, because he doesn't hang around me the whole time. Or does he trust the peers? I don't know. Stuff like this, that might be also a reason why it's asked, because you don't see your people all the time and you don't know maybe. So you want to measure it by sticking a thermometer and then saying, oh yeah, improvement by 2 degrees.
Yeah. Well, I think you just mentioned two very interesting things here. In the past, in the traditional organizations, traditional relationships, we measure people's outcomes and successes. Like they deliver some kind of product and service, and we pay them for that. And it's the same for traditional manufacturing and whatever. We know what the output per factory worker is. But nowadays, in the 21st century, organizations are becoming learning systems, and the learning implies improvement. So instead of demanding from day to day that a person delivers something, the most important thing for us is that they're learning how to improve the organization. So I, as a manager, am very interested in observing that improvement instead of observing the output of product, widgets produced per hour or something. So I think in that sense, it is a logical thing that this question is being asked more and more, because it is easier to measure widgets than learning and improvement.
Yep.
Another thing, the second thing you noted is that people are now distributed across the world. They form distributed teams, remote working, everything. You cannot just stand at a person's table and see what they're doing. You have to have some kind of other signal to indeed observe the learning and improvement that's going on. So interesting. That's two trends basically that identify, that lead to this question being asked, perhaps than in the past. Okay, so how do we answer it? If you rephrase the question to how do we observe improvement, whether it is with numbers or not, how do you go about that? Does anyone have a suggestion for me? Steve,
online thinking. This, no? You go ahead, Steve.
I guess it's how do you measure improvement on a terms of granular level? Is it improvement by the?
So
Patrick seems to.
Can you repeat that, Steve? Sorry.
So I guess it's on a granular level. Do you look at improvement on an employee level, or do you look at it department level, or do you look at it as an entire company? So at what point can you see the improvement? And also, when you're making improvements, do you understand the whole company is on board with making that improvement? So I guess there's communication channels, and also just who to target with the improvements.
Yeah, well, I know for certain that people, in particular managers, are interested in what do individuals in the organization contribute to the learning and improvement that is going on, because we pay them on an individual basis. That is rarely or never going to change. We hire them on an individual basis, we fire them on an individual basis. So we also want to know, what does the individual contribute to the system? Does that person have a place here? Does it make sense for us to pay him or her? So I think that is implied often with the question, how do we measure or how do we observe improvement at the individual level?
I think for the question often is, does everybody know and agree on what needs to be improved? If you have it clear between your manager and the team, or in the broader perspective of the company, what is it that needs to be improved? And you can set up a team and an individual plan of what the people say, hey, I think I can start doing a course here, I work with that person more, activities that you might deploy in order to come to or to contribute to that kind of improvement. and then you have an ongoing conversation about that. And of course, eventually that should show in the results, no? The results of you as an individual, somebody that has learned new things and is applying those new things. Because I see too many people going to a training because there is budget for training, and not because it will eventually help them to get better or to get better at helping others or helping the team. Well, you should. Yeah, but how do you actually then measure that? It's based on outcome, no? The behaviors that you actively deploy that helps to reach those improvements.
I'm not convinced that outcome is the right measurement, because
it's a bad word.
but you mentioned behavior, and that is actually much more of a thing. You can observe the behavior. You can just see that people are behaving differently, improved. You can just possibly just see it as a manager if you're around them enough. If not, maybe you can find somebody else that you trust, like the peers that this person works together with, to get feedback. Does that person show different behavior, improved behavior, basically? And I would actually be totally happy, from my point of view, with very subjective observations from 4, 5, 6 people on whether I'm improving on some area, something or another. And that might be better than seeing, okay, I have some minutes or some number of bugs or ratio of this or that numbers, rather than if somebody says, yeah, he's a much better listener now. His goal was to improve in being a listener. One of the big things that could be a goal of many people, I would guess. And, you try to be a better listener, and over 3 months, people who talked with me will tell me, yes, he's been listening much better. And maybe that's all I need. Maybe that's a result, actually, a very good and quite observable result. And I don't need to have numbers like he didn't interrupt me for 17 minutes or something like this. That's not important in the end. Yeah. And so that's why I'm so on the subjective issue, actually, that I find perfectly okay, because objectiveness that is implied by numbers will not be there anyway. And that's why I'm actually happy to have subjective evaluations of people that can evaluate it. And the best is always, that's what I've learned when I did it, is always have examples. If those people know that this is my goal, my improvement goal, because that's what you said, Patrick, that's clear. Goal, I totally agree. Without a goal, it's kind of difficult. We cannot measure improvement if we don't know which direction we want to improve, or we cannot observe it. Yes. So yes, you need to know, where do we want to go? Where is my, I want to be a better listener, say. To stick with that example, then I would need to make that transparent to everybody that I work with and that I listen to. And then they would need to be able to tell me, maybe within a 3-month period, yes, it has improved, or no, it hasn't. And I think that would be all I need, in fact, possibly, And so make transparent goals, let people know, maybe ask them to please give me feedback right away if it doesn't happen. Like, oh, look, you interrupted me again. And I said, that's perfectly okay. Tell me, that's fine. Oh, you interrupted me yet again. Or write it down. Maybe we can do something like, I don't know, kudo cards or so for improvement observations, and just write it down and stick it somewhere, and say, here, those are the things that I've noticed in the last couple of months. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I think it's almost about the visibility of what you're trying to improve. Yeah. So the visibility to your peers and also to your manager. So if everybody else isn't aware of what you're trying to improve, then actually it's just an internal issue. Mm. So maybe if we're in a kind of world where we had them above our heads everywhere we went, and people are like, oh, great, you did that. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting idea. It's that mix between personal goals and then also having them visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed with my own team, we started with OKRs early this year because I believe it's a very interesting practice where you have people be responsible for their own improvement instead of giving people targets. They set targets for themselves, which is, I think, a good thing. I set targets for myself when I'm running, for example. It makes sense from a sports perspective as well. But what I noticed is that people had difficulty coming up with things to measure, things to observe about themselves. The practice seems to assume a certain awareness and savviness about measurement and improvement that not all workers have or want to have. Basically, my team told me, well, why don't you show us what is important, Jurgen, in terms of things that we should be measuring, and we'll do our best to help optimize those numbers. And I mean, there's a thousands, tens of thousands things that you could be measuring at team level, at the individual level, etc. But what they struggled with was coming up with even a few simple ones for themselves. Do you recognize that people have difficulty understanding what they should be observing about their own improvement?
Beyond that, even people have difficulty even if they get clear goals. Companies normally call clear goals when they get them set. They still have issues understanding what that actually means. It is very strange. Maybe a very practical example. My manager is bragging about putting people in the spotlight because he thinks that he should manage at a higher level. He's an American, a Texan, who's really comfortable in micromanagement. And he then gives you in a workshop or in a meeting, he gives the word to somebody, and within 3 minutes he interrupts and talks for the next 15. Until April, where I got him completely to shut up during a 5-day workshop. That was an improvement from me. It was my improvement, and he didn't really know what to do with that. So there's these little things that I found it important that if the goal is to make people stand more in the spotlight, so that you can, as Christopher was saying as well, your peers observe the same behavior because they were used to him interrupting everything, and like that but to define it for yourself, it implies also a bit of self-knowledge. You have to also know, are you more introvert, are you more extrovert, are you somewhere in the middle? In what situations are you introvert and extrovert? Because that depends as well. So people are very extrovert when they hang out with friends. They talk to anybody because their friends are looking at them, while in a different environment they are more introvert. They have difficulties picking up phones and things like that. But that self-knowledge is very important if you want to work with self-designed targets and objectives.
Yeah, indeed. The self-awareness is a difficult thing. There's an assumption that people have it when you ask that they define their own observations and metrics and targets and etc. I mean, it takes some awareness for people to understand that they should live a healthier life and then make observations and perhaps even measurements in order to see if they're making any progress. 9 out of 10 people aren't doing that. Well, maybe some of them should.
So what you're focusing on is really personal improvements. So it's more saying that in the way that you behave, the way that you react, the way that you manage with other people, not necessarily kind of an efficiency improvement, an environmental improvement, some kind of innovation in the way that you do something. Something that changes the way the workplace is, maybe even just driving more social events or kind of changing the way communication works. So I think so far we've only really focused on the fact that it's a personal improvement. But there's all those other areas which actually change the way we function. So is that the main focus which you're heading towards with the idea of how do we observe or measure change?
My own context is that I'm paying people to do work for Happy Melly in this case, the team members, and I have a purpose for the organization. So I want to know if it makes sense to pay these people and if they're doing a good job at what we expect from each other to do. So we should be observing some things about our behaviors and our contributions and our progress as well. I mean, behaviors are all nice, but if we're not making any progress, despite the best behaviors, at some point we'll have to say, okay, this is not working. We'll have to do something else because the numbers aren't going up. So it is a bit of both. And I tried with OKRs in the past. It didn't really work. I liked the practice very much, but people had difficulty coming up with what they should be measuring. So what I'm doing now is I have this purpose, this high-level purpose. The next level is the objectives for the next couple of months. Like we want more experiments from people who signed up as a Happy Melly member, for example. More activity going on. Well, that's a qualitative objective. You should measure that somehow. And another objective could be we would like the newsletter to grow faster, number of signups, and respond more often to what we send out. So we have a couple of objectives, and each of those objectives, like with OKRs, results in 2, maybe 3 things that we actually measure. And I offer this now with a sort of a delegation level 3. Here's my suggestion. What do you think? Does this make sense? For example, one of my team members said, well, maybe the number of comments on blog posts is not the best thing. It's best to track backlinks from other websites, for example. Oh, that's a great idea. If you tell me how to measure it, we're going to swap that metric, no problem. So I expect them to offer suggestions, and I think that now works better because I offer them an idea of in which area I'm looking at in terms of the observations I'm making of our collaborative effort, but I'm sure they will have better ideas of things that we should be measuring given my initial version for the metrics. It is well known that people have more ideas once you offer them an initial one. Like if you ask a person, tell me what's in your fridge, they have a hard time coming up with things, but if you ask them, tell me what's in your fridge that is white, they are easily able to come up with milk, yogurt, and everything by offering them some constraints. So that's where I am now. I offer first version of things I'm measuring, and then it's a bit like a continuous flow. Some metrics go up, and then at some point you say, okay, well, we did a good job. Let's throw this one out. We've optimized it. We're going to find another one that we think is important as a team. But at least we're observing something, and nobody's being punished or rewarded for any of the results. So it is really an observation in that sense. Rewards are done in an entirely different fashion. But I, as the CEO, want to know if we're making progress, because if not, I would rather pay my money to other projects that have more success. But that's as far as I am now. So I think like I'm halfway of solving the problem for myself. Does it make sense for you, or do you have some other suggestions of what I could be doing in order to measure improvement, observe improvement?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm not 100% sure. Oh, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, go ahead, just confirming.
I have to think of the slides, some of the very first slides of the Energized People module, where we distinguish between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. And I sometimes think that if you have an objective, and that might be, I don't know what the objective is, if you have an objective and then you measure something else to make sure that the objective is reached, then you have exactly the same way as when you say, I want to reach a goal, and here's the result that I want to reward, so that and I expect the goal to be reached. And that's sort of the same way, where I think one needs to achieve in a way that the objective is what you really need to look that the objective is reached, not some other numbers that are an indicator of the objective.
Yes.
If the objective is to get more backlinks, then yes, measure the backlinks. But if the objective is to, I don't know, have more customer involvement or something like this, and the backlinks may or may not be an indicator. We don't know. And then we're chasing the backlinks and it doesn't help in the end. And then you say, okay, we have reached our results, but in the end, we don't really have more customers. We have all these backlinks, great, but the customers, no, it didn't work. So that's why I'm thinking is we want to make somebody happier or something like this, and ask him, are you happier, or do I have the feeling that person's happier? Not by saying, is he wearing different clothes, does he smile more often and counting the smiles or something like this, but by going directly to the objective. And I do not know how that can be done, but always, that's not always an easy thing, I understand. But that is my problem often.
That is why OKRs, and I now too with my modified practice, it makes a distinction between objectives and key results. Right. The objectives are qualitative statements, like I would like more engagement among the members of Happy Melly. That is a qualitative statement. It is in itself not measurable. But in order to know if you're making progress there, you will have to observe something. Like one indicator, indeed, is the number of messages on Slack channels. If we have this week twice many messages on Slack channels as we had last year, there is apparently some indicator here that there's more engagement among the members. That something is going on. It's not a complete picture, but it's one indicator.
But you could have on the random channel a line of all kinds of silly jokes going on that that's not interesting at all, and that doubles the numbers, and you don't have any real more engagement in the actual.
But so you need to have a couple of metrics that are proxy values, and then what the OKRs practice does, and what I do as well. You just you intentionally make it vague by calculating the average across multiple metrics. And then say, well, actually, the percentage is not important. It is important what we learn from what we measure, and that's intentionally de-emphasizing the value of the numbers themselves. Exactly. But it is a fact that people are happier when they see that they're making progress in certain areas. I was happy when I ran 10 kilometers for the first time in under 50 minutes. I was like, yay, I'm posting it everywhere on Facebook, etc. It was such an achievement. I mean, there's very little difference between 49 minutes and 50 seconds versus 50 minutes and 10 seconds, but it's personally, it's a huge difference. It's 10 or 20 seconds. So people want to be happier by seeing lines go up, and while at the same time we have to remind ourselves they're just numbers. Don't take it too seriously.
So maybe as a suggestion, maybe if you're looking at Slack. If you if your goal is to have more involvement of the Happy Melly members there, you might maybe not want to look at the number of messages, but the active contribution of the number of people on the different channels. I mean, if somebody is just joining the channel and saying hi, thanks. If somebody is saying hi in all channels, it's nice as well. But if this silly joking is going on and people get involved, and on the other hand they publish an experiment, and on another one they say, hey, I'm coming to the next Happy Melly Coffee, then you can see that people start to, because it's more the activity of people on the different channels. The more people active on more channels might be a better indicator than the number of messages itself.
Yeah, well, that's the issue with every metric. Every metric is incomplete and can be gamed. One of my favorite cartoons of Dilbert was that their team was going to be rewarded for the number of bugs fixed, and then one of them said, "Oh, I'm going to write myself a minivan."
Exactly.
That is typical, of course, of any measurement, but there's less of a danger when you measure yourself. I mean, I could easily gain my own metrics as a runner, but why would I? I'm measuring myself. That destroys the value of the very thing that I'm trying to achieve. So I measure as fairly as possible, and the same with a team. If you make sure that they own the metrics, then they will not game the system, because their own metrics will become valueless. and they will have better suggestions. Like you said, well, instead of measuring number of messages, maybe we should be measuring that. Of course, the tool will have to supply those statistics, but yeah, those suggestions are very welcome from the team because we're measuring ourselves. That's the main difference with traditional KPI systems where the measurements trickle down and all the targets, and then there's all the incentive to game them basically.
It's just that.
So if you relate your,
Steve, go ahead.
So if you relate your experience with running to an app called Strava, so Strava uses, is anybody familiar with it?
No.
It's a cycling app where you basically, when you're riding in the streets, it automatically compares you to other people. So you can work out if you are actually the fastest in the street on that particular day or in that particular year, so it rewards you and gamifies the whole process. So suddenly you're not a runner in one particular stream, you're a runner in the environment of the rest of the world, and you have benchmarks. So it seems like maybe there is something that's aligning from a single track mind into opening into something which is part of the wider community. And also if you compare why people are running, if they're to be setting their goals to say, well, actually I'm running to be, or I'm cycling to enter a race, then you know your particular goal that you need to get to. And then when you do the race, you kind of find out what position you are against the rest of the people competing. So there is some interesting analogies we could possibly take from there, is that actually being aware of what other people are doing and having feedback if they have goals, how close they are to it. And whether you're asking people for feedback, whether you're gaining feedback, whether you can say, where am I in my goal towards getting somewhere as a level.
I agree, but on the other hand, we have to take into account that people are motivated by different things, and that is in the private sphere as well as in the organization. Like, to take the metaphor of running, for example, I decline all invitations from people who want to hang out with me on my Endomondo app and compare running speed against each other, etc. Because running is a me thing. It's me on my own. I don't want to make it yet another thing that I do socially with the rest of the world. But that's just me. It's great that other people make it social. But that's a very personal thing. I'm motivated by the forest just around the corner and see deer with a curious look when I pass by. That is more motivating to me. So yeah, the motivation is something to take into account. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, but I mean, I was asking myself the question really with the running now. Was the objective? I mean, you have, I'm sure, a high level objective of being a runner. I don't know, healthiness altogether or whatever maybe is the thing, or being one with nature, deers and forests and so on. But if you put down OKRs, then actually objectives could be still, I think, something like I want to run a 10K under 50 minutes. That would be the objective, and it's the measurement. So there you have this possibility of saying my objective is to run the 10K in 50 minutes, and I can measure it right away. So it's the same. So the key result and the objective match, sort of like with the intrinsic motivators. My motivation, reaching my goal is the motivation. So the reaching my objective is the measurement, is by reaching the measurement, then I've reached my objective. The other way, there's this disjointed thing where I say, we want to have, I want to be a better listener, and then I measure all kinds of stuff. And that doesn't always, because systems are, as we all know, the complexity will not allow probably for the one-to-one correlation, the cause and effect, thing. And that's why I'm always so try to measure the objective. That's what I'm always saying, not get some separate key results, look at the objective and try to measure it. And if you can't measure it, then try to observe it, ask people about it. Am I a better listener? And if 3 people tell me, yes, I tell them beforehand, of course, I want to be a better listener. Please observe me.
Yeah.
After 2 months or 3 months or whatever, I ask them, and what do you think? You have some examples where I didn't, or where it doesn't change, and so on. So then I think that's the best That's measurement for me.
Yeah.
Other than any other things like, I don't know, whatever key results one could come up with. And that's, so try to measure the objective itself. And I think that's kind of, sort of like with the intrinsic motivation, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If one can beat that would be great. I don't know, that's not always easy, but then maybe it's not precise. Maybe then it's vague.
Yeah.
And you just have to go with it.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the book How to Measure Anything that I read 1 or 2 years ago. It was a very interesting book. The author said that basically that quite often people ask the question that they don't understand themselves, like how do we measure happiness? Then he said, well, I can tell you if you define happiness for me first. And then people don't know how to define happiness. And he said, well, then I cannot help you measure it if you don't know how to define it. So you have to define, you have to have a very clear idea of what it is that you are measuring. And sometimes it means that your objective is too vague. People don't know what improvement means, and they have to clarify what improvement is. That means make it more concrete, the things that you can actually observe. On the other hand, he also says, indeed, not everything needs to be a number on a linear scale. Something that you can simply recognize as a human being is sufficient as an observation. You don't have to attach a linear or exponential scale to everything. So it's a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, I think the numbers can help, but the numbers can also, if you focus too much on them, they can lead you the wrong path even, you know, because you focus on the numbers. It's sort of like the rewards, you know, you want to get the reward and you don't look at the goal anymore. You don't, you know, and I want to get the numbers no matter what, you know, but sometimes that doesn't even help. And so I think we as humans need to also accept that a judgment is okay. A judgment is okay. It doesn't have to be an objective measurement on a linear scale, as you say. A judgment is actually okay. And if there are several people that judge, you have a pretty decent chance of getting some decent feedback whether you're improving or not. You know, if you ask one person who hardly sees you, which is so often the case with managers, then you have a problem. But if you work with lots of people and you get judgments from them, I think you can get a very, very good good feedback whether you're improving in that certain area. And I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. Total agreement here. So any last words from Steve or Patrick? No? All right. Okay. Cool. So, well, thank you very much for your contribution, Christoph and Steve and Patrick. This was my question that I had that was on my mind. It's still on my mind. I will hope to have a practice that works for me and that other people might find valuable enough so that they can steal it. Certainly it is fun experimenting with measurements and observations and improvement. And whether it is running or running for myself or running a business. Nice metaphor. I keep coming back. I would like to, well, after thanking each of the three gentlemen, I would like to thank everyone else for watching. And you have a chance of adding your own question to the Trello board. We will make sure that we post the link on YouTube, and you can add your comments to Trello, and of course conversations will always happen on Slack among the Happy Melly members. So thank you for watching, and hopefully you'll join me next time in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think, for the next session. Thank you so much. Bye bye.